Gladiator II, a sequel that none of us were really asking for, but after sitting through it one time, it kind of warrants its existence. I think it's good. But this is another legacy sequel. This time Ridley Scott once again steps into the director's chair just like he did back in the year 2000 for the original Gladiator, which won so many awards, as I've talked about in my review for that movie. If you missed it, I will put a link to it right in the description box below. But you're going to hear this from a lot of other YouTubers just like me. Ridley Scott is 86 years old, and he's still finding a way to direct an epic movie like this. Like, that man deserves mad kudos. There's a reason why he's one of the greatest to ever do it. I'm not going to dig too deep into spoilers on this one, or talk really about who Paul Mescal's character actually is. But Paul Mescal basically plays a slave turned gladiator. Sound familiar? He must enter the Colosseum after the powerful emperors of Rome conquer his home. With rage in his heart and the future of the empire at stake, he looks to the past to find the strength and honor needed to return the glory of Rome to its people. Now, a lot of this plotline should sound pretty familiar, whether it be from the original Gladiator, from a bunch of Shakespearean plays that you might have read up on. And yeah, the derivative nature of Gladiator 2 is ultimately what could hold it back, just like the original Gladiator. But I think what's going to make this movie stand out for me amongst the rest of the movies we've seen in 2024 is how bloody entertaining it is. And I mean literally bloody entertaining. Ridley Scott, in all honesty, just makes the art of directing movies look so fucking easy. Just like its predecessor, this Gladiator is vast in scope. DP John Mathieson, who frequently works with Ridley Scott, their relationship actually started with that original Gladiator. And I honestly hope that a lot of the technicals of this, including cinematography, including production design, including sound mixing, I'm really hoping that this sequel is nominated for a bunch of Oscars just like the original one was. Now, that's not to say that I think that Gladiator 2 is a better movie than Gladiator, because honestly, like it had huge shoes to fill looking at how fucking awesome that original Gladiator is. This one is awesome too, but I feel like it finds its own way to be awesome. And the way they do that, I feel like, is by incorporating more action. This is a very long 2.5-hour movie, just like the original one was. But it definitely feels like there's a lot more action jam-packed into this. All that tied in with a bunch of political talk in this movie about overthrowing the tyranny in Rome. Like, this is still a super compelling narrative and script that they've put together here. And probably one of the biggest praises I can give Gladiator 2 is you're never bored watching it. Like, there is always something going on, whether it be an epic battle inside the Colosseum, which looks really wonderful in this movie, truly, or whether it be a political behind-the-scenes discussion where you have Denzel Washington pulling the strings. Everything is just so interesting to look at. I gotta talk about Denzel Washington because this man really is one of the greatest actors of our generation. And I was reading up that his career is really starting to wind down here. There's a few more projects that he has to do before he calls it quits. And that man's retirement is well-deserved. That man should be enjoying the fruits of his labor. Like, he's already done it all in Hollywood. But I feel like with his performance in Gladiator 2, a Best Supporting Actor nomination and potentially a win at the Academy Awards could be in his future. And this is a man who already has a couple of golden statues to his name. But I'll be honest, Denzel Washington's performance steals the entire movie. And this is a character that is just so interesting to watch evolve throughout the entire runtime, because you meet him, he's the guy who kind of buys our main character as his slave, if you will. But he never really mentions that he's a slave per se. He more so calls Paul Mescal's character a warrior. And Paul Mescal is kind of reluctantly along for the ride, of course. I mean, like, you'd feel reluctant in this situation, wouldn't you? But I think the perfect way to encapsulate Denzel Washington's character without giving too much away, puppet master. Like, you would never expect this guy to be behind a lot of the things that he's doing, but he is. And he's so freaking conniving, and Denzel Washington is just having such a blast doing this. You can tell that this guy is just relishing every single piece of dialogue that he has, every single opportunity to shine in front of the camera. He will absolutely take it. There are many reasons why this man is a legend, and I feel like Gladiator 2 is just another notch into his already vast legacy. You have a lot of great actors in here. Connie Nielsen returns to reprise her role from the original Gladiator. She is really good as well. She is absolutely devastated for a good majority of this movie. You also have Joseph Quinn playing a very snooty emperor, almost on the level of King Joffrey from Game of Thrones. Actually, that's more reserved for the younger twin between the two, and I can't remember this actor's name for the life of me off the top of my head. But both those guys were just like, those are characters that you just love to hate. And you just wanted to see these corrupt leaders get theirs. Speaking of leaders, you have Pedro Pascal playing a general who is very much on the path of our hero's revenge. And Pedro Pascal, also known as the busiest man in Hollywood right now, he's got a very interesting character to sink his teeth into. Although he's not on screen for very long, this is a very important piece to this story. And I wouldn't even necessarily call him a bad guy, even though it could be very easily constructed as a movie where he is the bad guy. But honestly, he's not. The deeper you dig into it, this is just a general who's doing his duty for the good of his country. And there's some really compelling conflicts going on with him. I was totally mesmerized by him. Also, very cool to see that we get a precursor to what Mr. Fantastic and the Human Torch are going to look like in Fantastic Four: The First Steps. Like, Pascal and Quinn together, that's a connection to keep your eyes on. And of course, I gotta talk about Paul Mescal as our hero. He has humongous shoes to fill in the wake of Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe won an Oscar for his work in the original Gladiator for Best Actor. That's the role that put Russell Crowe on the map. And similarly, this could be the part that puts Paul Mescal on the map. Very similarly to Maximus, this is a character who is fueled by rage. And Paul Mescal is really great in the action sequences as well. He brings the intensity, man. And there's a few sequences with him involving a few animals that you're not really going to forget. PETA will probably hate this movie. I'm just throwing that out there. But I think this is really good casting and really good direction and acting, for that matter, on Paul Mescal's part. Really, really solid work here, and I can't wait to see what else he does. Is he as good as Russell Crowe, and is this movie as good as the original Gladiator? No, I don't think so. I do think Gladiator 2 does have a few glaring issues here. Like, there's a couple of stupid little points in the movie that I'm still kind of questioning. There's a whole action sequence in the Colosseum where it's literally filled with water in the arena to recreate a ship battle. And this water is infested with sharks as well. First of all, where were they keeping these sharks back then? How did they get these sharks into the Colosseum? That's never addressed. But I will admit, very fun action sequence in a vacuum. And yes, talking about the action sequences, the movie does take a little bit to kind of get the ball rolling into the stuff where it really makes it stand out as its own standalone movie and a great sequel. Because it honestly does just feel like you're watching a derivative of the original Gladiator for a while. And I was getting really concerned, especially watching the opening set piece of this movie. It is very action-packed, but it's not on the level of brutality that I come to expect from a movie named Gladiator. But thankfully, the brutality is upped. The blood is just everywhere. Limbs are chopped off. And I was thinking, that's more like it. That's what I want from a Gladiator movie right there. But this sequel does admittedly take a bit to get into the true good stuff of this movie. But once you get there, it's captivating shit, man. Gladiator 2 is a sequel that I didn't necessarily need, and I didn't know if I was going to love going in. But a lot like Top Gun Maverick a couple years ago, even though this movie isn't as great as Top Gun Maverick per se, this is a movie that certainly lets me entertained. And I feel like it's a movie that is going to leave you entertained in this life or the next. I'm going to give Gladiator 2 an A-. This may be a tad bit generous for some of you guys, but as someone who loves that original Gladiator movie and as pumped as I was to see this movie, this may be a bit of an unconscious bias grade on my part. I loved it though. I thought it was a really solid movie. I think it's one of the year's finest. If you loved Gladiator 2 like I did, let me know down in the comments section below, and let me know what your favorite Ridley Scott movie is. There's a lot that you can pick from. Alien, Blade Runner, The Martian, the original Gladiator. That's a pretty versatile filmography if you ask me. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button, tap on that thumbs up as well. Thank you so much again for continuing to support this content as I continue to crank it out as we close out a great year 2024. Y'all are the best, guys. And with all that being said, back talk commence.